It's been a heavy week. I sent out a Facebook message the other day, and I told them, parents, get your kids to church. I don't care if they roll out of bed and you bring them in your jammies. Get your kids to church. I don't care if you have to bribe them with coffee or a bagel or whatever. Get your kids to church. It's been a heavy week. I think we need some prayer. And there was requests for, to videotape and all this stuff. It's a heavy week. Please pray with me. Dear God, I need your help in this place. I cannot do this without you. I get nervous or I get too excited and I talk too fast. God, I cannot do this without you. God, if I've written down anything that's actually worth listening to, Lord, I just ask that you open their ears, open their hearts to receive your word. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I kind of have a lot to say, so before we get started, I wanted to know if you're a clock watcher, if you need to be out at 12, I respect that. Leave when you have to. There was once a woman named Corrie ten Boom. And she was a kid during World War II, and it was just an amazing author and a hero and just an all-around incredible person. And she tells a story in one of her books about a time when she was on the train with her father, and she was just a real little girl. And she had heard a phrase that she didn't quite understand. Maybe she had heard it at school or something, and so she decided to ask her dad. She looked at her father and said, "Father, what is sex?" I mean, we're talking 4, 5, 6 years old, just a real little girl. And the father's eyebrows kind of shot up, wondering where his daughter had heard that. And he didn't say anything for a while. There was a pause. And then he stood up and he reached up into the rack that was up over their heads, over their seats, and he pulled down the traveling case and he put it on the ground. And he said, "Corrie, can you carry that off the train for me?" And the little girl, eager to please her father, jumped up and she pulled on the case. And it was full of watches and spare parts that they had just bought that morning. And she pulled on it, and she pulled on it, and she said, "It's too heavy. I can't lift it." And he looked at his daughter and he said, "Yes, this is quite a load to bear." And it would be a poor father who would ask his child to carry that load. But it's the same thing with knowledge, Corrie. There is some knowledge that is too great for you to bear. When you are older and stronger, you will be able to bear it. And I promise I will tell you everything. But for now, you must trust me to hold on to it for you. And Corrie ten Boom writes that in that moment, she was satisfied. She was more than satisfied. She was wonderfully at peace because she knew that there were answers. There were answers to all of her hard questions. But for now, she was content to leave those answers in the capable arms of her father. Today, we're going to do something a little differently. Last week, we started a new sermon series, but we're going to pause that for today. We'll come back to it next week, but I think today we need to hear something else. We need to hear a different story. And as many of you know, this past week was filled with tragedy. In Las Vegas, there was a lone gunman who killed over 50 people and wounded hundreds more. And then 2 days later, there was a young man in the Ishpeming school system who committed suicide. And there are moments when tragedy piles on top of tragedy and it all becomes just a little bit too much. Some of us think that we are tough. We think that we're callous and we're almost numb to the pain. We think about all the things we see on TV and we think, I can't be surprised anymore. But when it comes so much, so fast, we can't handle it. And we are filled with questions. And it's not just our children who are asking questions. We are asking questions too. We don't know the answers. What is this? Why did it happen? God, how could you let this happen? Where were you? Why? Why did this have to happen? And we don't know how to answer the kids' questions because we don't know how to answer our own questions. And that makes us frustrated. And that leaves us with resentment and bitterness. And then that kind of leads to anger. And we're frustrated and angry with God. But then a couple of months ago, actually this is quite a while ago. It was like in February or March. I found this scripture passage. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I wasn't reading Hosea out of any deeper motive. I won't lie to you. I don't know the Bible that well. There are pieces in the Bible that I just don't know very well. And I'm a little embarrassed by that, right? Because I'm the pastor and I'm supposed to have all the answers. So sometimes I read pieces of the Bible that are very obscure just so I can try and figure them out. I don't understand, so I am reading it just to figure it out. And I was reading through Hosea. And Hosea is not a very well-known book. Nobody reads through Hosea. But I was reading Hosea and I found this passage and I read it and it hit me in the gut. I got to chapter 11 and I read it and I read it and then I read it again. And I almost started crying because I'm reading this story and it's talking about God teaching his children how to walk. And at that moment in my life, I was literally teaching my child how to walk. My son was just starting to walk. And it hit me and I was just so overwhelmed with what I found in the text, what I found in the story. And so I found something. I learned something that day and I wanted to show you what I have seen. And then we'll just leave it at that. And then next week we'll go back to our sermon series. Is that okay? That's what we're going to do. Okay. Today I want to tell you the story of Hosea. Now I'm going to warn you, the story of Hosea is very strange. But I promise it's not as gross as last week. If you were here last week, we told the story of Ehud, and it was very gross. But today, it's a little different, but it's equally strange. Hosea was a prophet of Israel way back in the Old Testament. He was a messenger for God. So God would tell things to Hosea, and then Hosea would tell them to the people. Now, usually it was some kind of a bad news or a warning, something's coming, or sometimes it was corrective, like Israel, you're doing something wrong, stop doing that. That's what prophets did. And so, but then in Hosea's life, God did something very unusual. God turned to Hosea and he said, okay, here's the deal. Your life is going to be a metaphor for my relationship to the people. Your life is going to be it's a symbol for how I interact with humanity, for how God deals with humans. You're going to get married and you're going to have some kids, and all of that is going to represent God with his children, with his people. And so Hosea says, okay, I guess that's my life. You're my God, so I'm going to follow your instructions. And God says, okay, great. Go marry that prostitute. Seriously, that's what he tells God. He says, go and marry that prostitute. Now, I don't know about you guys. There was a woman named Gomer. And so in this story, Hosea is going to be like God. He's the good and faithful man. But Gomer is going to be like all of humanity, the unfaithful wife who runs away from God, who runs away from her husband. And so God says, go marry a prostitute, and then hopefully you'll be able to get her to quit her day job. Hopefully. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this sounds like a really bad idea. I mean, what is God thinking? Go marry a prostitute? How is this going to work out well? How is this going to work out? I don't see it. This is a very dysfunctional family right from the beginning. Hosea is the prophet, right? He's the man of God, the good guy. But then we've got Gomer, the prostitute. I mean, this is a bad idea. But hang in there, it gets worse. Hosea and Gomer have 3 children, and Hosea gives them the worst names you've ever heard. Hosea names each child, and God tells him to name the children this way. And so here's what he does. The first child is a boy, and he names the son Jezreel. Now, that doesn't really mean anything to us, but Jezreel was the name of a place where a horrible disaster happened in Jewish history. Okay, so I mean, this was a terrible, terrible thing. And it's kind of like naming your kid Hiroshima, right? It's kind of like naming your kid Chernobyl, right? Like, come here, little Chernobyl, we'll call her Cher, right? And so that's what he says, name your child disaster. Now, if I was Hosea, right, if I was Gomer, right, if I was the wife, I'd be furious. Are you kidding me? You named my child what? You named my child after this epic disaster? What are you thinking? Now, in my personal life, when my son was born, we went with the family name. We named my son William after my grandfather, but we call him Liam. But I wonder what it would have looked like if I had gone to Sarah and I had said, yeah, the family name, that's a good idea, but how about instead we name our kid Epic Disaster? Huh? How about that? I just don't think I could have convinced my wife to name our child Epic Disaster. So that's the first kid. And then the second kid comes along, and this time it's a girl. And Hosea names that child Lo Ruhama, which means you are not loved. That one's not very funny. I can laugh at the first one, but I feel like we kind of crossed a line here. He looks at his daughter, and he says, your name is you are not loved. And then they have a third child. It's another boy. And it's the second child, and Hosea names that one Lo Ami, which means you are not my people. And some translators, some interpreters say what that means is you do not belong. So that's Hosea. He names his three children Disaster, you are not loved, and you do not belong. And that's chapter 1 of the book of Hosea. Now that's chapter 1. So we have this really weird setup. It's this really strange metaphor / reality. Hosea, your life is going to represent, it's going to be a metaphor, it's going to be a symbol for God's connection to humanity in this broken relationship, this symbol. Now, at the end of the chapter, he does say, one day we will change the names of the children. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. And so we fast forward to our lesson for today, and we get up to chapter 11, and the metaphor shifts. So in the beginning, it's a husband and wife relationship. That's the metaphor, that's the symbol. But now God changes it to a father-son relationship. So now in chapter 11, God is the father, and the people are the child. Okay, so the metaphor shifts, and we get to chapter 11, verse 1, and it says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and I called my son out of Egypt. But the more I called to him, the farther he moved from me, offering sacrifices to the images of Baal and burning incense to the idols. Does that sound kind of familiar? Not the sacrifices thing, but the other part, the first part. The more I called to him, the farther he moved away from me. Do we have any parents of teenagers in the house? I don't know about you guys, but that's how I was when I was a teenager. My parents told me that if they wanted to get me to do something, they would always tell me to do the opposite, because that's how I worked in those years. The more I called to him, the farther he moved away from me. I read a letter the other day, and it was from the mother of a drug addict. Her daughter had become a drug addict. You see, when problems happen in our society, especially with addiction, a lot of people, they turn around and they blame the parents. They ask, where were the parents? Where were the parents when this horrible thing? And so she wrote this open letter to society. And she writes, I see the comment so often when it comes to addiction, where were the parents? Well, that really infuriates me, because where was I? When you were born, I stayed up all night feeding you and changing your diaper. When you were 5, I helped you learn how to ride your bike without training wheels. When you were in 2nd grade, I taught your catechism class, and I watched with pride while you made your first Holy Communion. When you lost your teeth, I was the tooth fairy. When you were involved in sports, I came to every game. When you were 16, we had a code word, Bible, that you could text me at any time, and I would pick you up anywhere, no questions asked. When you were 17, we got you into therapy right away. Where was I? I was frantically driving around the streets of Detroit trying to find you when you were out on a binge. I was searching for rehabs with you, trying to get you the help that you needed. I was riding that roller coaster of addiction that practically tore our family apart. Where was I? That's where I was. And God says, the more I called to him, the further he moved away from me. And then we get to and it keeps going in verse 3. It says, I myself taught Israel how to walk, leading him along by the hand, but he doesn't know or even care that it was I who took care of him. I led Israel along with my ropes of kindness and love. I lifted the yoke from his neck, and I myself stooped to feed him. I don't know what it is about these verses, but I read them over, and I guess I've never looked at God that way. I've never thought about God as a dad. You know, we talk about God our Father, right? In the Lord's Prayer, we say, our Father, and it's like this official position. But I never thought about God as a dad. teaching his child how to walk, teaching his son how to walk. It says, leading him by the hands. Well, that image in Hebrew, what that word actually means is putting your hands up under their arms and supporting them, just like you do when you're teaching an infant how to walk. God teaches us how to walk. And remember the metaphor. We are the child. God is the father. Listen to verse 3 again. I myself taught Israel how to walk, leading him along by the hand, but he doesn't know or even care that it was I who took care of him. Do you hear that? God taught us how to walk. And then we get to verse 5, and the tone shifts just a little bit. Because God is God, because God is the parent, he knows what's coming. He can see down the line, see that the actions of his children are going to cause some problems. And so in verse 5, he starts talking about what's coming. It says, but since my people refuse to return to me, they will return to Egypt, and they will be forced to serve Assyria. War will swirl through their cities. Their enemies will crash through their gates. They will destroy them, trapping them in their own evil plans. See, now he's talking about what's literally about to happen in history. There was this empire, the Assyrian Empire, and they're about to crush and destroy Israel. The country of Israel made some mistakes. They turned away from God. They did a couple of shady deals with some of the other countries. They ticked off the Assyrian Empire, and now their actions, the consequences are coming back. God says, they're going to destroy you, trapping you in your own evil plans. Assyria is coming, and they're going to destroy Israel because of their evil plans. So you bring that into the modern world. When we make mistakes, there are consequences to our actions. And the parent, as the father, God has this frustration. His children are leaving. He taught them how to walk, and now they're walking into the wrong places. His children aren't listening. They're not obeying. We are not listening. We are not obeying our God. And he knows that that's going to hurt us. He knows what's coming later. He knows how this is going to come back and bite us. He sees the consequences of our lives coming back on us. He says, my people are determined to desert me. They call me the Most High, but they don't truly honor me. Do you kind of hear the parental frustration? He's like, my kids are not listening to what I just taught them. I raised them better than this, but they're not listening to me. They're leaving. And honestly, there's a little bit of justice here. Israel screwed up. This is their fault. They share the blame. They caused the problems that they're about to deal with. God held up his end of the deal. God was a good and faithful God, but the people were not. And so God could easily just kind of step back, wash his hands, tell his kids, look, you made this bed, you lie in it. This is your problem. He could do that. Now take the mess that Israel's in, take that horrible situation and bring it up into the modern world. I don't know about you guys, but when I watch the news, natural disasters aside, most of the problems we see in the news are humans hurting humans. We created this mess of a world that we live in, and God would be totally justified stepping back and just letting us implode, right? Letting us just destroy ourselves. But I want you to hear the pain that comes out of verse 8. Now, before we get there, I kind of want to give you a setting. Imagine this with me. Imagine that you're a parent of a toddler. Okay, or imagine you're a parent of a really small child, like maybe 2-3 years old. And imagine it's one of those nightmare days, right? You know which days I'm talking about. The days where the kids are just, they're horrible. They're just being terrible. They're like little psychos just running around in every direction. It's like a teenager who just discovered caffeine and they're just off the rails and they're just infuriating, right? They don't listen. They're not trying to obey. They're not even trying to be good. They don't obey. They're not trying to learn. They're cranky and they're screaming and they're just, they're like selfish, obnoxious little monsters determined to drive mom and dad crazy. Now, it sounds like I'm, exaggerating, but some days that's what it feels like, right, parents? Some days they're just awful, and it's been a long day. It's been a long, frustrating day. And finally, the kid goes to bed. You finally get the kid into the crib, and they fall asleep. And something happens in that moment. There's something about the face of a sleeping child. I don't know what it is, but it's like magic. right? That face that was beet red and screaming and drooling and snotty like an hour ago, now it's beautiful. It's like the face of an angel. There's something that changes when you're a parent and you're standing over the crib and you're looking down on the child, and all that anger and all that frustration, and you're looking at the child. It's like magic. I don't know how it happens. All right, and in that moment, that's when I hear verse 8. Listen to verse 8. He says, oh, how could I give you up, Israel? How can I let you go? How could I destroy you like Admah or demolish you like Zebulun? My heart is torn within me. My compassion overflows. No, I will not unleash my fierce anger. I will not completely destroy Israel, for I am God and not a mere mortal. I am the Holy One living among you, and I will not come to destroy. For someday, this is a God who has every right to destroy us, to wipe us off the face of the earth for all the pain that we have caused in our world. And he looks on us, he looks down on us, and he says, how can I give you up? How could I let you go? How could I give you up? My heart is torn within me. Do you see the face of God in these verses? Do you see him in these words? God chooses forgiveness. God chooses hope and love. Instead of giving up on us, God never gives up on us. God, our Father, stays with us all the time. And then the last two verses turn to the future. Say, for someday the people will follow me. I, the Lord, will roar like a lion. And when I roar, my people will return trembling from the west. Like a flock of birds, they will come out of Egypt. Trembling like doves, they will return from Assyria, and I will bring them home again. And so now we have this like tone of victory and this awesome power and might, and it's almost scary. Right? We have this image of a lion. Now, lions are pretty awesome, but I don't want to like hang out with a lion, you know? They're scary, they're terrifying, they're dangerous, but they're really cool. But I'm really glad there's a big, some cage between me and the lion. Is anybody here a fan of C.S. Lewis? You guys know The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Does that ring any bells? You guys remember Aslan the lion? That's where he gets it from. God roars like a lion. He's terrifying and awesome and powerful. Maybe if you don't know C.S. Lewis, anybody here seen The Lion King? Have we seen, yes? Am I the only one who watches Disney? Yeah? All right, so The Lion King. You remember that story, right? And if you haven't, go home and watch it. It's awesome. And so there's this lion, right? And at the end of the story, you got Simba, and he defeats his evil Uncle Scar, and all the hyenas, and everything was on fire. And then it starts to rain, and it's kind of miserable, and it's just sort of this like darkness and desolation everywhere. But what happens? He starts to climb the mountain. He starts to climb up Pride Rock, and it takes him forever. It's like slow motion. It's just climbing up that mountain, and the music swells, and he gets to the top of the mountain. What does he do? He roars. The lion roars, and maybe the first roar is kind of a roar of pain, and sadness, and all this devastation and desolation that he sees. I mean, he just sees darkness and all this horrible stuff that's just happening, and he roars, but he just keeps roaring, and as he roars, it turns into a roar of victory, and everyone all the other lions start roaring with him, and the music swells, and then Disney does that thing that they always do, where everything fixes and everything turns around. God calls to his people. He roars like a lion, and they come home. Now, literally, this happened in history. Okay, the Assyrian Empire, they came in and they crushed Israel. They destroyed Israel, deported them out of the country for generations. But then the next empire came in, the Babylonians came in and defeated Assyria, and Israel got to go home. God brought his people home. It took a long time, but he did it. And so we've got all these metaphors and images, but God brings them home eventually. And all of this is connected to the real world. So let's go back to Hosea. Hosea married Gomer, a prostitute, because a prostitute abandons her husband just like humanity abandons God. Right? That's the image, that's the parallelism. And so the question is, why would a man give a prostitute a chance? Why would a man marry a woman who he knows is unfaithful? Someone he knows is going to make mistakes. He knows she has a history of being a terrible person. Why would a man do that? Why would God bother with humans? Why does God give us free will? Seriously, why doesn't he just come in and force us to be good people? Why doesn't God just come into our lives and turn us into little robots that do what we're supposed to do? Why doesn't he just turn his children into obedient, good people? Why does God give us free will? I mean, look at what happened with Hosea's family. Look at what he named his kids. Disaster, you are not loved, you do not belong, because the children of this weird, dysfunctional family that Hosea has, they're going to feel like disasters. They're going to feel like they're not loved. They're going to feel like they do not belong. The reality of this situation is a mess, both in Hosea's life, but also in God's connection to his people. It's a dysfunctional mess of a family. It's a horrible situation, and that's what the real world looks like sometimes. It looks like a horrible, dysfunctional mess of a family. But at the end of chapter 1, God changes the names of the children. God says in verse 10, he says, in chapter 1, verse 10, he says, all right, you were told you are not my people. Remember that was the name of the youngest kid? He said, you were told that your name is not my people. But it will be said, you are children of the living God. Do you see how this works? God is changing their name. He's like, you were told you were a disaster. You were told that you are not loved. You were told that you do not belong. But I tell you, you are children of the living God. That is your new name. And so let's bring it into the modern world. There are going to be times in your life when you feel like a child of a broken relationship. There are going to be times in your life when you feel like a disaster, when you feel like you are not loved, when you feel like you don't belong. But God looks at you and he says, I'm going to change your name. You are children of the living God. And so we have this dysfunctional mess of a family. And after that, God roars like a lion and he brings redemption. He turns it into a dysfunctional family love. It's still dysfunctional. The world is a mess. It's not better today. The world is far from perfect, but with God, there is a glimpse of hope and something better. Why would a man give a prostitute a chance? Why would a man marry a woman that he knows is going to be unfaithful to him? Because maybe by the end of this story, we have a man and his faithful wife and their 3 beautiful children. Why would God give humanity free will? Why would God give humanity a chance and a choice? Because maybe at the end of this story, you're going to have God who is faithful and people who are faithful and this beautiful family. The good news this morning is that God parents us. God's action in the world, God's love for us, it's not some far-off judge who sits up on a cloud and demands things from his children. That's not the father that God is. God guides us and teaches us and despairs when we turn from what he taught us. He watches in pain and anguish when we cause problems and we reap destruction on ourselves. God parents us and he watches over us and he cares about us. God loves you. Let me say that again. God loves you, and that love is the love of every father and every mother that ever lived, and then some. It's even better than that. God parents us, and God's parental love is creative. It brought us into this world. God's parental love is instructive. It teaches children how to be better people. God's parental love is tolerant and patient. It allows his children to make mistakes, to grow. It gives them room in grace to make mistakes and learn and grow. God's parental love is healing. It brings us back to wholeness. God parents us. Now here's the important part. Now you heard the passion and the pain and the anger and the love and the hope in the way that God parents in the story of Hosea. You heard that. Now if that is real, if that story is true, if God actually parents us, if God really is our Father, what does that make you? Children of God. Yeah, I can kind of hear it. You guys know. You are children of God. And so our job is to claim our identity as children of God. I am a child of God. You are a child of God. We are God's children, beloved by our Creator, and he's rooting for us. He's always rooting for us. I am a child of God. That's our identity. That's our hope. That's our reassurance. Can you say that with me? I am a child of God. One more time. I am a child of God. Ooh, you guys are more awake than the early service. It took them like 3 or 4 tries at that early service. God is your father. God is your mother. God is the ultimate parent, teaching you, guiding you, rooting for you, supporting you. God is the one who comes up to you and puts his arm around you when you're feeling sad or you feel like you've lost something and you're feeling kind of broken. God's the one who puts his arm around you. Now, I know what you're thinking. Some of you think, no, that's my friend Megan. She's the one who comes and puts my arm around you. That's what I said. God is the one who jumps up and down gleefully with you and he celebrates and he's joyful. Now, I know what you're thinking. Some of you are thinking, no, that's my friend Eric. He's the one who gets excited with me about stuff. Yeah, that's what I said. God is the one who sits with you and cries hot tears of brokenness when you are feeling abandoned and you've gone through something devastating. And some of you are thinking, no, that's my mom and my dad. That's my parents. Those are who I turn to when I'm broken and I need someone. Yeah, that's what I said. God parents you. You are a child of God. All right, for the teenagers who are in the house, this part's for you. Adults, it applies to you too, but if I lost the teenagers, wake up. I know I lose you sometimes. I have a question for every person in this room. What makes you valuable? Where does your value come from? Where does the world tell you your value comes from? What makes you valuable? Now, I want to give credit where credit is due. This whole little thing I'm about to do, I stole this from a guy named Bob Lenz. He's this guy we brought to the high schools about a year ago. He's really awesome, and it was a good idea back then, and it's good news now. What makes you valuable? Let me give you a hint. It's not your boyfriend. It's not your grades. It's not how many friends you have or how many sports you do. It's not how much money you have in the bank. What makes you valuable? It's not how many Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat people you're following. There is nothing on the outside that gives you value. Your value comes from the inside, and nothing, no one and nothing can ever take that away from you. This is a $100 bill. I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. This is my $100 bill. And as a pastor, I don't get to hold very many of these. So this is kind of a special moment for me. Now, I'm not actually going to give this to anyone, so don't get your hopes up. But if I were to offer this to you, is this valuable? Is this a valuable $100 bill? Could you do something with this? It's valuable, right? Well, all right. What if I crumple it up? Is that still valuable? What? But I crumpled it up. I beat it up. I made it look terrible. It's still valuable? All right, well, what if I throw it on the ground, stomp on it? Is it still valuable? All right, well, what if I pick it up? What if I tear it? Jeez, I actually tore it. What if I tear this $100 bill? Is this still valuable? Did I make it a little less valuable? No, it's the same. All right, well, what if I tell you that I broke up with this $100 bill? This $100 bill, nobody loves it. Nobody loves this $100 bill. What if I tell you it's worthless? Could you still spend this? Yeah, you probably could, yeah? But I told you, okay, well, what if I tell you that it got cut from the sports team? What if I tell you that this $100 bill is bad at sports? What if I tell you it got an F in school? It failed. This is a dumb $100 bill that is bad at sports. Is it still valuable? It's still worth $100, but it's bad at sport. Okay. What if I crumple it up and stomp on it and tell it that it's not loved? What if I tell you that it's awkward? What if I tell you this $100 bill doesn't know how to talk about its feelings? It's nerdy and weird. Nobody likes it. Is it still valuable? Is it still valuable? I can't hear. Answer me. Is this still valuable? Is this still valuable? I don't believe you. Is it still valuable? Your value does not come from anything outside of who you are. Your value, nothing that happens in the world can change your value. You are a child of God. Nothing changes that value. Your value comes from in here, and no one ever can take that away. No one ever on the outside can even make you worth 1 penny less. For every mistake, for every abnormality, for every awkward piece, for every weirdness, for every loneliness, for every heartbreak, there is a God who cries out to you in verse 8, how can I give you up? How can I let you go? My heart is torn within me, and my compassion overflows. So first, remember where your value comes from. It's not out here. It's in here. And no one can take that away. Remember that. Second, cling to a God who knows more than we do. I'm not going to get up here and tell you that I know what's going to happen. I'm not going to get up here and read you those Bible verses that make everybody feel better. I'm not going to give you some platitude about, it's all part of God's plan, because I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know what horrible thing is going to happen tomorrow or a couple weeks from now. I don't know how God is going to turn all this chaotic mess around. But I read this story, and what I found in that chapter is a God who is a parent who loves his children and never gives up on his kids. I read about a God who roars like a lion and calls us home again. And so I read that there is hope. There is always hope in the darkest day. Corrie ten Boom once asked her father a question that she was not ready for. And her father turned to her and said, let me carry that burden for you. Someday I will tell you what you want to know. I will tell you all the answers, but for today, let me carry that burden for you. Sometimes I think about all the horrible things that happen, and we rage and we cry out and we ask a lot of questions. We ask a lot of questions when bad things happen, but really the answers won't make us feel any better. The answers are not really what we want, because in that moment, we feel like kids again, don't we? I feel weak and uncertain and afraid, and I hate feeling like that. And so I lash out and I get angry and I get bitter. I don't want answers. I want a parent. I want someone that I can lean on. I want someone that I can trust. I want someone whose strong arms will hold me up because I can't stand it anymore. I don't want your answers. I don't care what the answers are, because the answers won't bring him back. I don't want your answers. I want my dad. I want my mom. I want someone who's going to give me the tightest bear hug ever. I want to hug my dad because he can take it and I can punch him a little bit. And I can be angry and I can punch him until my arms are sore and I'm sobbing into his chest and he's still holding me. I don't want answers. I want my dad. I want my mom. I want my parent. God parents us. And so I'll leave you with this. May you turn to God and ask him to carry the burden when you can't lift it yet. May you remember that your value comes from out here and not. May you remember that your value does not come from out here. It comes from in here, and nothing and no one can change that. And may you wait, patiently wait for the God who will roar like a lion, and he will bring us home to redemption. Amen.